Ah, the holidays. That time of year when you get to see cousins you've been missing, eat family recipes, and exchange gifts that you are surely to hate. Oh, and sometimes avoid talking about one member of the family who will not be visiting anytime soon. Here are 15 true stories about people who are related to a killer. Enjoy. A cousin of mine found out a guy in town had been sleeping with his wife, so he knocked them both out, tied them to the back of his truck with chains, waited for them to wake up, and then drug them up and down a couple gravel and asphalt roads at varying fast and slow speeds, until all their clothing and most of their skin had come off and they were both dead. Police said he had them back there dragging for about 4 hours. One of my grandmother's cousins on my mom's side was a child killer. And I mean to say that he was a child that killed other children. He was about 6 or 7 when he got his first victim, which was a little boy that died from a mysterious gun accident. For his second victim, he was about 10, and it was a little girl. He tied her to a tree and set her on fire. When he was 13, he was walking home after dark and was hit by a car and died. My grandmother's Aunt Frida's face was stomped in by her abusive husband. He killed her by kicking her face in because she couldn't keep the baby from crying. They had 4 kids under 4 at the time, all of whom were home when it happened. The relatives got together and decided the best thing for the kids would be to go and live with an aunt who wanted kids, and though married to a nice man, didn't have any yet. Their aunt and her husband raised them as their own, alongside the children they later had. My grandmother and the older cousins, the ones old enough to remember Aunt Frida, were sat down and told that they weren't to talk about her ever again, or tell the younger children about her. And because my family is good at keeping secrets, they didn't. Eventually, their father got out of jail and went to get his kids. They were in their late teens, and he just showed up mildly intoxicated and demanded they leave with him. My aunt lied and told him he had the wrong house. She also pointed out that her kids didn't match the profile of the family he was looking for, given there were 7 of them and too many girls and not enough boys, claimed them all as her own, and sent him away. Since the kids hadn't heard even a whisper of a rumor that their parents weren't their parents, they thought he was just some insane stranger, thought nothing else of it. He later killed himself. Since 3 of the 4 children were dead before one of my cousins started doing family history research, uncovered the truth, only one of the 4 ever found out, and even then, it was 70 years later. My grandfather murdered my grandmother when I was 3 years old. I'm 21 now. I have no recollection of my grandmother or grandfather at all. He hit her 17 times in the head with the blunt side of a claw hammer. He was sentenced to 6 years inside due to psychosis, developed cancer in prison, and died of cancer when he got out. I have family ties to a guy called Juanario Garcia Leal, also known as 7 Ears. He was a Brazilian farmer in the 1700s, and one day, his brother was brutally murdered by being strung up on a tree and having all of his skin slowly removed. Colonial justice didn't help him, leaving the 7 perpetrators free to go. So Juanario personally went after each man, killed them, and, as a trophy, chopped off one of their ears and hanged it on a necklace. I know it sounds like a B-movie, but it's real. And I'm kinda glad I have about 10% of a lineage with that man. Around 22 years ago, right before I was born, my great-grandmother told my mother that she killed her abusive husband, my father's father, by pushing him down the stairs while he was in a drunken stupor. She then called the cops, who had already had run-ins with my great-grandfather, and were aware of the domestic violence in the household, so they reported that my great-grandfather had fallen down the stairs accidentally and by his own fault. My father had absolutely no idea about this until my mother told him, and still had a difficult time processing it. I guess I think this story is both disturbing, but also super badass. My mother's great-aunt murdered her son by putting rat poison in a cherry icy. The messed up thing is that she went to prison but for the attempted murder of her other son. Apparently the cops forgot to read her Miranda rights and wasn't charged with murder. She then attempted to kill her other son and got caught. They had to pump his stomach, and he barely survived. A couple of years ago, the surviving son committed suicide, and when they told her, all she said was, "Well, I'll be damned." She was seriously crazy, and because of her, we never let Mom get us ices. You know, just in case. My grandfather was a badass. He was part of a resistance movement in Denmark during World War II. We never knew most of the details, but based on hints and rumors, we're pretty sure he was tasked with taking out a few collaborators. But that's not the disturbing part. He and my grandmother dated when they were very young, but broke it off when she moved to Sweden. A couple of years later, she moved back to Copenhagen with an abusive, alcoholic Swedish husband in tow. While she was away, my grandfather joined the Danish Royal Guard. According to my grandmother, shortly after my grandfather and some of his Royal Guard colleagues were introduced to her husband, he was found dead in an alley under mysterious circumstances. She'll say no more about it, and never spoke a word about it when my grandfather was present. Long story short, we're all pretty sure Grandpappy straight up murdered that Swedish jackass, and then turned around and married his widow. My grandfather spent 3 years and 4 months fully immersed in the Vietnam War. He had 2 daughters, so he never felt comfortable opening up to them. He never opened up to his wife or his therapist. He just didn't feel like anyone would understand. Then I joined the army, and he decided I was the one he would talk to. He told me a lot of stories, but I remember one in particular. He said they were on a 3-week patrol up on the border of Cambodia near the 17th parallel. Before heading out, he had talked to a platoon that had run a similar route to them. They were warned that the local VC liked to send kids out with gifts for the GIs and would hide grenades and Coke cans and take a few of their men out. So my grandfather is out there. They stop to check their map, and some local children just come out. Then he sees a little girl with a Coke can. He yells at her to stop. His squad yells at her to stop. They're all pointing their weapons at her and telling her to stop. Grandpa fires a burst at the ground in front of her to get her to stop, but she keeps coming. So he decides it's time and dumps the mag. And it turned out to be an actual Coke can. That's not even the most disturbing thing I've heard out of him, but it's the darkest story I care to share. I was writing a lot of it down at first, but then I decided that those memories need to leave the world when he goes. Everyone in my family low-key knows that my grandfather killed his wife. He was 10 years into an affair with a woman, and only 2 people in my family knew about her. One day, my grandfather went fishing with my grandmother, went downstairs on the boat to go to the bathroom, and when he came back up, my grandmother had fallen into the water, and he was unable to rescue her because he didn't know how to swim, despite being a naval commodore. Not 2 weeks after his wife's funeral did he take a much-needed break to Egypt, where he pretended to meet the woman he was having an affair with. They got married, denied it, and to this day maintain they're not married, and met for the first time in Egypt. My family knew these details because said mistress confided in my mother and grandmother on the other side of the family, and told them everything that had happened, in fear that my grandfather would do something to her too. When I was 10, I was messing around in my grandparents' basement and found a picture of a man in a uniform holding up several heads by their hair. Turns out the pictures were of my great-grandfather in World War II, and the heads belonged to SS soldiers who he was told murdered a group of children. So in a fit of rage, he murdered the soldiers and beheaded them. My mother burned the photos after I had recurring nightmares about him trying to behead me. Also have an uncle who got court-martialed after he skull-fucked a Viet Cong. The official story is that my great-great-great-grandfather's daughter committed suicide with a shotgun by lying in bed and pulling the trigger with her toe for reasons unknown. The story that my family actually believes is true, based on years of research and interviews with surviving family members who knew him, is that he was sexually abusing her and killed her when he found out she was pregnant with his child. We also don't believe she was the only person he killed. In 1993, my cousin murdered his brother and his dad. He is extremely intelligent. I mean scary smart. He got up one day and got a glass of milk, said it tasted funny, and thought they were trying to poison him. He shot his dad while he was lying in bed, then went after his brother. When the police arrived, he tried to say that his brother tried to kill him, and he took the gun away. But the only place his brother's prints were on the gun were on the end of the barrel, like he was trying to push it away from him. He is now currently serving life without parole in prison. My dad was an alcoholic and addicted to hard drugs. He was on crack when I was born, and he wasn't at the hospital when my brother was born. In '97, when I was 3, we went to a game ranch in Georgia the day after my 3rd birthday. Both my dad and my uncle, my mom's only other sibling, got drunk, and my father got physical when my uncle started calling my mom names. He punched him square in the face, and my uncle fell to his knees. The only thing I remember from that night is a paramedic blowing up a glove for me. My uncle was brain dead, and they pulled him off life support the next day, 2 days after my birthday. My dad did time for involuntary manslaughter and came home in May of 2002. On November 11th of that same year, I walked in the living room after getting home from school while my mom put groceries away. She told me that night that I had said Daddy was sleeping funny, but he wasn't sleeping. I was sent to a neighbor's apartment while they tended to my father, and I knew he was gone when I came outside a couple hours later, to my mom's face gleaming in the streetlights from tears. I went back into the apartment when my mom found a house to help pack, but she never stepped into the apartment again. My great-great-grandfather was a strange dude by all accounts. He was also the itchy trigger finger sort. His wife was beautiful and quite fond of men in general. He caught a guy leaving their home one day when he came home from work, so he shot the guy in the head. Surprisingly, he lived with no serious injury, though allegedly there was another guy he caught that wasn't so fortunate. The thing is, it was a small town, and our family basically was the law in the area at the time. At some point, great-great-grandpa finally had a total meltdown. He shot his wife, her dress caught on fire, so he stomped it out and shot her again, then shot himself. My great-grandfather was the one to find them when he was 5. At some point, my great-grandfather actually ended up working with the man his father shot that survived. Apparently his face was an absolute train wreck because of it. And when he started working with the guy, he kept eyeing the scars. The guy finally said, "You know how I got this way? Your old man shot me." Must have been an awkward conversation. My great-grandfather was hell on wheels as a young man and made regular trips to Mexico and points further to party. Apparently, he quit going after he shot a couple of guys after an argument. Our ancestor that first came to my home state did so on the run. He married a girl, and shortly after, got her twin sister pregnant. The brothers got angry and planned to kill him. He got word and ambushed them. He didn't kill them, but he shot them several times and left them in bad shape. So as you prepare for your holiday parties this year, remember this. You can pick your nose and you can pick your butt, but you can't pick your relatives. See you next time.